Goliath, when I was growing up, was one of those stories that I like to act out with my dolls and my animals. Now, I do not recommend you do this at home, because animals are living, breathing creatures, but it's kind of like the poor Archdeacon, with his paw that was injured before I got him, that he can barely walk on, taking on a full mountain lion and strangely winning. That is the story of David and Goliath, at first glance. There you go. Good boy. But what is the story really about? Oh, and there's the Archdeacon in the background. What is the story of fighting Goliath really about? Yes, it's about David, who was no one and nothing, a simple shepherd who only had a slingshot. But really, if we step back a moment and really look at what's going on, we see a much bigger picture that involves God's plan for this world. So, a long, long time ago, in a not quite so mythical kingdom known as Israel, there was a weak king named Saul. Now, if we look at our lives, we can see many leaders, your parents, the governor, the president, if you're in another country, prime minister, a king or queen. It could really be anybody in authority. And people always have a tendency to judge these leaders. In biblical times, in the times of King Saul, people judged the king just as harshly as some people judge leaders now, even more harshly. And with Saul, the sign that he was not an effective ruler, the sign that he really did not deserve to be king of God's chosen people, was the fact that an invading army was coming in and just kind of wiping everybody out. Now, in the terms of biblical and later medieval combat, one side would amass a large army, the other side would amass a large army, and they could easily go at each other until the armies were both dead or crippled and no one really won. Or there was another way to go about warfare. Each side would choose a champion. Each side would choose a champion, and whoever champion won would essentially win the military conflict. So here Saul is, king of Israel, king of the chosen people, God's anointed ruler. This guy is bigger than big. There is no one on earth who quite compares to the position Saul had. And his kingdom's being invaded. And worse than that, they're going about this by single combat, and the Philistines have this great big giant named Goliath killing everyone once a day, whoever comes up against him. This guy, by modern standards, would have been probably over 9 feet tall. Strong, muscled, no one could stand against him. He was a warrior. He was the best at his craft. And with his height, his strength, and his military prowess, he could very easily just snap whatever champion Saul sent him in two. And he did that every single day. Until David. Now David, we know, will one day be the king of Israel. He is the father of King Solomon, the wisest of men who ever lived. But here, now, he is just a simple shepherd. He's no one in society. He's not a warrior. He's not of gentle birth. If he went into a banquet, he would probably use the wrong fork. That is the type of guy David is. But God had a plan. God knew that Saul was not worthy to be king. And so he took David from a very small infant and arranged his life quite carefully so that he was in the exact place at the exact time he needed to be. And so David, a young shepherd, outwitted the giant Goliath and killed him, which paved the way for him becoming one of the greatest kings Israel had ever known. Is this a story of the little guy standing up for himself? Yes, of course it is. But it is also the story of a little guy listening to God's plan. A little guy who didn't know what would happen when he faced Goliath. A little guy who was never expecting to become king. But he trusted in God then. And today we must trust in God now. We're here in America, on planet Earth, and we see things as humans see things. We cannot look into the future. We cannot know what's going to happen tomorrow. But God knows. God has seen all, and God will take care of us. And hey, if in the process we get to slay a few giants with a slingshot or with our good intentions, if we can rise above everything that is happening in our nation and in our world, well, I'm sure God is smiling down upon us. Amen.